Dante's clothes long after he left, a ghost of the place that haunted his drive back to the city. He sat on the hard, molded plastic chair, his fingers tracing the graffiti carved into the small table that separated him from the reinforced glass partition. Another Tuesday. Another visit. On the other side of the smudged plexiglass, Rocco appeared, led by a guard whose face was a mask of bored indifference. Rocco looked older than he had just a week before. The harsh fluorescent lights carved deep shadows under his eyes, and the orange jumpsuit hung on his frame, a stark contrast to the sharp, tailored suits he used to wear. But when he saw Dante, a genuine, weary smile broke through the grimness. He picked up the phone on his side. Little brother, Rocco's voice, slightly distorted by the cheap receiver, was a familiar anchor in the surreal nightmare of the last 2 years. You didn't have to come. I know you're busy at the hospital. Where else would I be? Dante replied, his own voice softer, laced with a perpetual ache. How are they treating you? Rocco shrugged, a gesture that was meant to be casual but looked like the movement of a man carrying a great weight. Same as always. The food is still an affront to humanity. I'm reading a lot. Trying to stay out of the way. This was their ritual. The pleasantries, the careful avoidance of the elephant in the room, the appeal, the dwindling hope, the crushing reality of a 20-year sentence for armed robbery, a charge Dante knew, in his soul, Rocco never should have faced. I spoke with Mom yesterday, Dante said, shifting topics. She's making that lasagna you like. She says she's going to freeze a portion for when she can bring it to you. Rocco's smile was sad, understanding the unspoken lie of optimism. Tell her I said thank you. And tell her not to worry. I'm fine. But he wasn't fine. Dante, a surgical intern at ABC General Hospital, was trained to read the subtle signs of distress, the minute tells of a body or a mind under duress. He saw the tension in Rocco's jaw, the way his eyes flickered around the room, never fully at rest. He saw the fading yellow bruise along his temple that Rocco had previously brushed off as a fall in the shower. Rocco, are you sure you're okay? That. Dante gestured vaguely towards his own temple. It's nothing, Dee, really. Don't worry about me. Rocco leaned closer to the glass, his voice dropping, though it was unnecessary. How's life on the outside? Any new, what do you call them? Me? Miracles? Dante offered a small, pained smile. Not quite. It's mostly long hours and bad coffee. Saved a kid's appendix last Thursday. Routine, but it felt good. It felt right. That's my brother, Rocco said, his chest swelling with a pride that seemed to momentarily eclipse his surroundings. The healer. You're doing what you were always meant to do. You're the good one, Dante. Never forget that. The words, meant as a compliment, landed like a blow. They always did. It was the unspoken contract of their lives, Rocco, the older, tougher, street-smart brother who dealt with the harsh realities so that Dante, the brilliant, sensitive one, could soar. Rocco had worked 2 jobs to help pay for Dante's textbooks. He'd been the one to confront the bullies, to navigate the rough neighborhood they grew up in, to provide a steadying force when their father passed away. Dante's success was built on a foundation of Rocco's sacrifices. And now, Rocco was here, in this cage, while Dante walked free. The guilt was a cold stone in Dante's stomach, a constant companion. Don't say that, Dante murmured, looking down at his hands. We just took different paths. We did, Rocco agreed, his tone final. And yours is the one that matters. Listen, I gotta go. Johnson over there is getting twitchy. He nodded towards the guard. Tell Mom I love her. And you take care of yourself, you hear? Don't waste your time worrying about me. I'll be back next Tuesday, Dante promised, his hand pressing against the cold glass. Rocco mirrored the gesture, his palm flat against the partition for a brief second. I know you will. Dante watched him be led away, his broad shoulders slightly slumped until he disappeared through the heavy steel door. The stone of guilt in his gut felt heavier than ever. He replayed the conversation in his head during the entire drive back to Port Charles, the words "you're the good one" echoing on a loop, taunting him. He went straight to the hospital, the sterile, purposeful chaos of ABC General, a welcome distraction from the stagnant dread of the prison. He lost himself in the rhythm of rounds, in the precise language of diagnoses, in the intense focus of assisting in a trauma surgery. For a few hours, he was Dr. Dante Falconeri, competent and in control. But the facade was fragile. Later, in the on-call room, trying to steal a few moments of sleep, the memory surfaced, as it always did when his defenses were down. The night that had irrevocably broken their lives. It had been a desperate, stupid plan. Rocco, struggling after losing his legit job as a warehouse foreman, had gotten involved with the wrong people. A man named Sonny, who offered quick money for tasks that lingered in legal gray areas, which soon turned pitch black. Dante had begged him to get out, to just walk away. "It's one last job, Rocco had pleaded, his eyes wild with a mixture of fear and determination. "Just one. A simple collection. Then I'm done. I'll have enough to clear my debts and help Mom with the roof. Then I'm out, I swear." Dante had known it was a lie. Men like Sonny didn't let people just walk away. But he was drowning in his own life, medical school loans, the immense pressure to succeed, and he had let his brother go. That night, the simple collection had gone horribly wrong. It was an armed robbery, a setup. The police were waiting. A shot was fired, later proven to be from a security guard, and in the ensuing chaos, Rocco was the one caught, holding the bag of money and a gun he swore he never intended to use. The prosecution had been brutal. Rocco's prior associations were laid bare. He was painted as a dangerous, habitual criminal. Dante had testified as a character witness, his voice breaking as he spoke of his brother's loyalty, his sacrifices. But it was like trying to hold back a tidal wave with his bare hands. The jury saw the facts: armed robbery, a criminal record, a gun. They didn't see the brother who read poetry, who cried at old movies, who had once spent his entire paycheck to buy Dante a stethoscope for his birthday. The verdict was guilty. As the judge pronounced the sentence, Dante had locked eyes with Rocco. He didn't see anger or blame in his brother's gaze. He saw a profound, devastating acceptance. And a silent plea: live your life. For both of us. The pager on his hip screeched, jolting him from the memory. A multi-car accident on the interstate, multiple casualties incoming. He splashed water on his face, shoved the grief and the guilt into a locked box in the deepest part of his mind, and ran towards the ER. For the next several hours, he was a machine of flesh and bone, stitching, stabilizing, making split-second decisions. He saved 2 lives that night. But it never felt like enough to atone for the one he felt he had failed. The days bled into one another. Tuesday approached again, a date on the calendar that now inspired a low thrum of anxiety. He found himself calling the prison, asking to speak to the warden, expressing his concerns about Rocco's safety, about the bruise he'd seen. "Inmate Falconeri is fine, Dr. Falconeri," the warden's assistant said, her voice a study in bureaucratic dismissal. "We have everything under control. He's in general population, and he's adapting." The words did nothing to soothe him. Adapting in prison parlance could mean anything. The morning of his visit, Dante's shift ran long. A patient in the ICU took a sudden turn for the worse, and Dante, along with the senior attending, fought for over an hour to stabilize him. By the time the crisis was over, he was running late. A nervous energy buzzed under his skin. He called the prison to let them know he'd be delayed, but the line was busy. He tried again. Still busy. He rushed out of the hospital, the bright midday sun feeling obscene after the dim, controlled light of the ICU. His drive to the prison was a blur of swallowed panic and white-knuckled grip on the steering wheel. Every red light felt like a personal affront. The busy phone line played over and over in his mind. It was probably nothing. A technical glitch. It had to be. When he finally pulled into the prison parking lot, he knew immediately that something was wrong. There were more cars than usual, several of them unmarked sedans that screamed law enforcement. The normal, sluggish atmosphere was charged with a tense, urgent energy. Guards were stationed at the entrance, their faces grim. His heart began to hammer against his ribs, a frantic, terrified drumbeat. He hurried to the main entrance, his ID already in his hand. "I'm here to see my brother, Rocco Falconeri," he said to the guard at the desk, his voice tighter than he intended. The guard, a man he'd seen before but never spoken to, looked up. His expression was unreadable, but there was a flicker of something in his eyes, pity, perhaps. "Visitation is suspended for the afternoon, sir." "Suspended? Why? What's going on?" Dante's voice rose. "I'm his brother. I have a right to know." The guard hesitated, then picked up a phone, murmuring into it. After a moment, he said, "Take a seat, sir. The warden would like to speak with you." "The warden?" The cold stone of guilt in Dante's stomach turned to a block of ice. "What happened? Is Rocco okay? Tell me. Please, sir. Take a seat." The minutes that followed were the longest of Dante's life. He paced the small, grim waiting area, each second stretching into an eternity. Scenarios, each more horrific than the last, played out in his mind. A fight. An illness. A transfer. But the official presence, the suspended visits, the pity in the guard's eyes, it all pointed towards something catastrophic. Finally, a door opened and Warden Davies emerged. Dante had met him once before, during the initial intake process. He was a tall, lean man with a military bearing and a carefully neutral expression. Today, that neutrality was cracked. He looked tired, and his gaze, when it met Dante's, was heavy. "Dr. Falconeri," he said, his voice low. "Please, come with me." He led Dante to a small, private office just off the main lobby. The room was Spartan, containing only a desk and 2 chairs. Dante didn't sit. He stood, his entire body trembling with a dread so profound it felt like a physical force. "What's going on?" Dante demanded, his voice a raw whisper. "Where's my brother?" Warden Davies closed the door and leaned against the desk, folding his arms. He took a deep breath. "Dr. Falconeri, I'm afraid I have very bad news. There was an incident this morning in the yard." The world began to tilt. Dante gripped the back of a chair to steady himself. "What kind of incident?" "There was an altercation. It appears several inmates targeted your brother." The warden's words were measured, clinical, as if he were reading from a report. The guards intervened as quickly as they could, but the injuries he sustained, they were too severe. The words hung in the air, meaningless and yet all too clear. Injuries, too severe. Dante's mind, a doctor's mind, automatically began to catalog the possibilities: blunt force trauma, stab wounds, internal bleeding. But his heart, his brother's heart, refused to process it. "I don't understand," Dante said, shaking his head. "Where is he? I need to see him. I'm a doctor. Maybe I can." "Dr. Falconeri," the warden interrupted, his voice softening with a compassion that was somehow worse than the clinical tone. "Rocco was pronounced dead at the scene." "I'm so sorry." "He's gone. Gone." The word was a sledgehammer. It shattered the world. The air was sucked from the room. Dante's legs gave way, and he collapsed into the chair he'd been gripping. The sounds of the prison, the distant clang of doors, the muffled voices, faded into a high-pitched whine. All he could see was Rocco's face from last Tuesday, the sad smile, the hand against the glass. "No," he breathed. It wasn't a denial. It was a protest against the universe. "No, that can't be. I was supposed to see him today. I was late. I was late because of work." The sentence trailed off, the implication hanging in the air, poisonous and devastating. "The prison is on lockdown," the warden continued, his voice seeming to come from very far away. "We're conducting a full investigation. I can assure you, we will find out who was responsible." Dante wasn't listening. the facts, the investigation, the promises of justice, they were meaningless noises. The only thing that was real, the only thing that existed in the crushing void of that moment, was the truth. Rocco was dead. He was killed in prison. And he, Dante, had let it happen. The warden said more things, about procedures, about the coroner, about collecting personal effects, but Dante heard none of it. He stood up, mechanically, his body moving on autopilot. He walked out of the office, through the lobby, and out into the blinding sunlight. He made it to his car, fumbled the key into the ignition, and then he just sat there, his hands resting on the steering wheel, staring at the grim, gray facade of the building that had become his brother's tomb. And then, the dam broke. A sob wrenched itself from his chest, a raw, guttural sound of pure agony. He cried for the brother who had protected him, who had believed in him, who had smiled at him through a pane of glass just days before. He cried for the lost years, for the future that was stolen, for the children Rocco would never have, for the family that was now irrevocably broken. But mostly, he cried with regret. It flooded him, a torrential, suffocating wave. Regret for every time he had accepted Rocco's help without question. Regret for not fighting harder to pull him away from Sonny and his world. Regret for the night of the robbery, for not locking the door, for not chaining him to a radiator, for doing anything, to stop him from walking out that door. Regret for being the good brother, the one who got to live the charmed life while Rocco paid the price for both of their existences. Regret for being late today, a irrational, searing thought that maybe, just maybe, if he had been there on time, his presence could have somehow altered the cosmic calculus, could have kept Rocco out of the yard at that exact moment. He pounded his fists against the steering wheel, the horn blaring a short, pathetic bleat that was swallowed by the vast, uncaring parking lot. He screamed until his throat was raw, the sound echoing inside the confines of the car. Tears streamed down his face, hot and relentless, blurring the world into a watery mess of gray and green. He saw the arc of their lives play out behind his eyes, two boys playing stickball in the street, Rocco taking the fall for a broken window Dante had actually broken, Rocco showing up to his high school graduation with a ridiculously expensive watch, the pride in his eyes at Dante's medical school graduation. The last image, the one that would be seared into his memory forever, was Rocco's hand, pressed against the glass, a final, futile connection. He had failed. As a brother, as a protector, he had failed utterly. His success, his white coat, his stethoscope, it was all a monument to his failure. He had healed strangers while his own flesh and blood was dying in a cage. How long he sat there, weeping in the prison parking lot, he didn't know. Time had lost all meaning. The storm of grief eventually subsided, leaving behind a vast, hollowed-out exhaustion. He felt empty, scraped clean from the inside. He started the car and drove away, not towards home, but aimlessly, the roads a blur. Somehow, his body, with a will of its own, navigated back to the only place he knew, the place that defined him, ABC General Hospital. He pulled into the staff parking lot and sat for another long while, watching the comings and goings of doctors, nurses, and patients. A place of healing. A place of hope. It felt like a cruel joke. He finally forced himself to get out and walk inside. The automatic doors hissed open, and the familiar sounds and smells of the hospital washed over him, the beeping of monitors, the squeak of rubber soles on linoleum, the scent of antiseptic. It was a world he usually commanded. Now, he felt like a ghost moving through it. Dr. Falconeri? Are you okay? He turned to see a young nurse, Chloe, looking at him with concern. He must look a sight, pale, eyes red-rimmed and swollen, his posture broken. I'm fine, he lied, his voice hoarse. He cleared his throat. Long shift. He didn't wait for a response. He walked straight to the on-call room he had been in earlier, locked the door behind him, and sank onto the narrow bed. The silence was deafening. The image of Rocco in his orange jumpsuit, smiling, superimposed itself over the image of the warden's grim face. Killed in prison. The words were a brand on his soul. He was a doctor, a man of science and reason, but in that moment, he felt a superstitious, primal certainty. His regret was not just an emotion, it was a tangible force. It was the weight that had tipped the scales. His failure had created the vacuum that allowed this tragedy to happen. He had been given a gift, a brilliant mind, a path out of their difficult beginnings, and he had used it to build a life for himself while his brother, the architect of that opportunity, had languished and died. He thought of all the times Rocco had told him, "You're the good one." The words were now a curse. His goodness was a hollow, selfish thing. It was a fortress he had built to hide behind, while the real hero, the one who embodied the messy, complicated, sacrificial love of family, was gone. A new wave of tears came, quieter this time, born of utter desolation. He cried for the man his brother could have been, had life been fairer. He cried for the conversations they would never have, the forgiveness he would never be able to truly ask for or receive. He cried for the simple, unbearable truth that he would never see Rocco again. Never hear his laugh. Never feel that steadying hand on his shoulder. The regret was now a permanent part of his anatomy, as integral as his heart or his lungs. It would inform every diagnosis he made, every suture he tied, every life he saved from this day forward. Every success would be a reminder of his ultimate failure. Every patient's grateful family would be a glimpse of the family he had failed to keep whole. He lay there in the dim room, the spoils of his career, the privilege of this small, private space in a temple of healing, feeling like a grotesque mockery. Rocco was killed in prison. And Dante, in his crisp white coat, surrounded by the tools of salvation, had never felt more helpless, or more guilty. He would have to go tell his mother. He would have to find the words to shatter her world. He would have to plan a funeral instead of a visit. The future stretched before him not as a path of promise, but as a long, gray road of penance. He was a healer who could not heal the most important wound, a savior who had arrived too late for the one person who truly needed saving. And as the sounds of the hospital, a place of second chances, drifted through the door, Dante Falconeri buried his face in the thin pillow and cried, the bitter, endless tears of a regret that would now define him forever. Dante Falconeri had convinced himself that he was prepared for anything, but nothing could have prepared him for the sound of Jordan's voice when she called his name outside the PCPD conference room. He saw the look in her eyes before she even opened her mouth, and his stomach dropped so fast he had to hold onto the doorframe to steady himself. "Dante," Jordan said softly, carefully, as if each word was too heavy to speak. "There's been an incident at the juvenile facility." Dante swallowed hard. "What kind of incident? Is Rocco okay?" Jordan hesitated, and Dante felt the world tilt. "Jordan," he repeated, voice cracking, "is my son okay?" Jordan stepped closer, lowering her voice, but no softness could blunt the blow. "There was a fight in the yard. Rocco, he didn't make it." The words were muffled, distant, like they were coming from the bottom of the sea. Dante blinked, shaking his head as the room spun. No, that can't be right. He's a kid. He's my kid. He can't be gone." Jordan's expression held the weight of truth Dante didn't want. "I'm so sorry. They tried everything. By the time the guards intervened, she didn't finish. She didn't have to." Dante's knees buckled. The breath punched out of him with a broken sob he couldn't control, and he slammed his hand against the wall as if pain could anchor him to reality. No, my boy, my son." His voice echoed through the hallway, raw and gutted, and Jordan placed a steadying hand on his back even though nothing in the world could steady him now. Dante pressed the heels of his hands into his eyes, like he could rub away the nightmare. "He was just scared," he whispered, barely audible. "He was scared, and I didn't get to him in time." Jordan shook her head gently. "You did everything you could." "Obviously not," Dante snapped, choking on grief. "If I had done everything, my son would be standing here right now instead of God, lying on a slab." A crushing silence filled the space, and after a long moment, Jordan said, "Do you want me to call Olivia?" Dante nodded numbly, guilt cutting through him like a knife. "I should be the one to tell her. But I don't know if I can even say the words." Jordan guided him to a bench, and Dante lowered himself slowly, his hands shaking uncontrollably. Images of Rocco flashed through his mind, laughing at the kitchen table, complaining about homework, glancing back at Dante with a mix of fear and anger the day he was taken into custody. Dante dragged in a ragged breath. "I promised him I'd fix it. I promised him I wouldn't let anything happen to him. Jordan sat beside him. No parent can protect their child from everything. A father should, Dante whispered, staring at his trembling hands. I should have done more. Jordan's phone buzzed, and she excused herself. Dante sat motionless, fighting to breathe. When the door at the end of the hallway opened, and Olivia Falconeri came rushing in, Dante felt his heart crack all over again. Dante? Olivia's voice carried the fragile hope of a mother clinging to denial. Jordan called, she didn't say, but please tell me my grandson is okay. Please. Dante stood slowly, his eyes red and swollen. Ma, he whispered, and Olivia froze, reading the truth in his face. No, she gasped, stumbling backward, hand flying to her mouth. No, Dante, no, please. He caught her as her knees gave out, holding her tightly as she sobbed into his shoulder. My baby, my sweet Rocco, Dante closed his eyes, his tears falling into her hair. I'm so sorry, Ma. I'm so sorry. I should have been there. I should have kept him safe. Olivia pulled back, grabbing his face in her hands. No. You listen to me. This is not your fault. It is, Dante insisted bitterly. I put him in there. Olivia shook her head fiercely. You followed the law. You did what you thought was right. Dante let out a shattered laugh. And where did the law leave him? In a place where a kid could get murdered? Olivia hugged him again, both of them clinging as if the grief might drown them. Later, at the morgue, Dante felt like his legs were filled with cement as he followed the attendant to the cold metal drawer. You don't have to see him, Jordan murmured. Yes, Dante whispered. I do. When the sheet was pulled back and he saw Rocco's still, pale face, Dante let out a sound that tore from his soul. Oh God, oh my boy, he touched Rocco's cheek with shaking fingers. I'm here. Daddy's here. He bent down, pressing his forehead against his son's. I'm so sorry, he cried. I'm so sorry I didn't save you. He kissed Rocco's hair, his tears falling onto the motionless curls. You deserved better. You deserved everything. Hours later, back at the loft, Dante sat alone on the couch, staring blankly at the wall, unable to move. Lulu's voice echoed in his memory, protect him, Dante. No matter what, and he covered his face, sobbing uncontrollably. When Sam arrived, she didn't say a word, she simply knelt in front of him and took his hands. Dante, she whispered gently, talk to me. Dante shook his head. I can't. I can't even breathe. Sam squeezed his hands. I'm right here. Whatever you need. I need my son back, he choked. I need to look at him and tell him I'm sorry for failing him. I need to undo every mistake I made. Sam's eyes welled with tears. You didn't fail him. Didn't I? Dante growled, pulling his hands back. If I hadn't pushed so hard, if I hadn't insisted he face consequences, he'd be alive right now. Sam swallowed. You made a decision out of love. Out of wanting to save him from going down a path he couldn't come back from. And instead I sent him to his death, Dante whispered. Sam wrapped her arms around him, and he collapsed against her chest, sobbing. He died alone, Dante whispered. He died scared, and I wasn't there. Sam held him tighter. You loved him. He knew that. Dante shook his head. He died probably thinking I hated him. No, Sam insisted firmly. Rocco knew you loved him. Kids know. They always know. Michael arrived shortly after, gently placing a hand on Dante's shoulder. I'm so sorry, man. Dante looked up at him, eyes hollow. I can't do this. Michael sat beside him. Yes, you can. We're going to get through it together. Dante scoffed. There is no through this. Michael hesitated, then said softly, we'll find out who did it. I promise. Dante's expression hardened. Oh, I intend to. And when I do, Sam grabbed his hand. Dante. Don't go down a path you can't come back from. They murdered my son, Dante said, voice low, dangerous. And someone is going to answer for it. Then let the law take care of it, Sam pleaded. The law? Dante barked a humorless laugh. The law is what killed him. Olivia appeared in the doorway, wiping her tears. Revenge won't bring Rocco back. Dante shook his head slowly. No. But justice might give me a reason to keep breathing. That night, Dante walked into Rocco's empty room. The toys, the posters, the clothes left on the chair, everything was frozen in time. Dante sank onto the bed, picking up the baseball Rocco had insisted on keeping from a little league game. You were supposed to grow up, Dante whispered. You were supposed to have a future. He lay back on the pillow, clutching the baseball to his chest, tears flowing silently. Sam stood in the doorway, watching with heartbreak in her eyes. Dante, she whispered, stepping toward him. Come to bed. I can't leave him alone, Dante said weakly. Just a little longer. Sam sat beside him and rested her hand on his back. I'll stay with you. Dante turned his face into the pillow and sobbed again, the grief unbearable, overwhelming, all-consuming. The next morning, Dante stood in front of the mirror, staring at his reflection. This is my fault, he whispered. This is on me. But then, beneath the brokenness, something else burned, determination. At the station, he walked into Jordan's office. I want everything, he said. Every report, every camera angle, every guard's statement. I'm going to find out exactly what happened to my son. Jordan nodded solemnly. I'm assigning my best people. And I'll make sure you're involved in every step, within reason. No, Dante said sharply. I'm involved in all of it. Every detail. Jordan exhaled slowly. All right. But Dante, let us help you. You want to help me? Dante said quietly. Find who killed my son. As the investigation deepened, Dante's grief twisted into something fierce and unrelenting. But when he returned home each night, the devastation cracked him open all over again. He cried for Rocco in the quiet hours, cried for the years they lost, cried with the endless regret of a father who tried to do the right thing and paid the ultimate price. And every time Sam held him, every time Olivia reminded him he wasn't alone, Dante whispered the same broken promise into the darkness, I'll make this right, Rocco. I swear to you, I'll make this right.